Greg, first of all, thank you so much for joining us for the Swordsport podcast. Really happy to have you here. Let's go back to before you were Maestro Greg Massialas. I mean, we've known each other a long time. You were obviously high-level competitor, 3-time Olympian. Just talk about what was fencing like in the U.S. and internationally back when we were competing?
Well, back in the day when I kind of got started or got going, and I was started making, say, like junior world teams, we competed in 2 tournaments a year, national junior tournaments, and that where the team was selected off of 2 tournaments. One was the junior nationals and one was the junior Olympics. So they accumulated the points, and then everyone would go to one tournament, the junior world championships. That was our international tournament a year. And of course, that is a whole nother picture right now. But because we didn't participate in any other international events. The other thing which is interesting is through my entire fencing career, my personal fencing coach saw me compete, through say a period of about 16 years international, 4 years as a junior and 3 years, 3 quadrennials, so 12 years on the senior national team. My personal coach saw me compete internationally 1 time, and that was at the World University Games.
Wow.
That is very different now. Now, basically, all our athletes are going to a large degree with their own coaches very, very often, and that's very good in many ways because of the fact that they are able to see how we do, and they'll also get more in touch with the international game. So it was kind of like we were definitely the outsiders back then, and I was part of the first generation. There were a few of us that were actually, especially on the senior, once we got to be seniors, that actually we went starting in 1977 to spend time in Europe and travel around to participate in senior World Cups and do that on a somewhat regular basis to at least get some familiarity, even though we were sort of all by ourselves, sort of fencing vagabonds of sorts back then. But I was based out of Paris, and I'd go to different World Cups for periods of time. But nowadays, it's a whole other situation. We have established athletes, coaches travel with the athletes. The juniors participate in many junior World Cups a year, and then the Junior World Championships is sort of the pinnacle of those events, as opposed to being the only event that we'd go participate in. And then, of course, we've sort of risen to the top, where we're one of the top countries in the world on the cadet junior level. We're one of the big 3, basically us, Russia, and Italy. And then on the senior level, where we're trying to break through men's foil, we are one of the big 4. Us, Italy, Russia, and France. In other weapons, we are, not necessarily the same level because it's very competitive. And so when we were competing, it was very, very limited what we could do. We had to do the best we could do, and I think we did an admirable job. But now they're doing the best that they can do, and they're bringing home medals.
I agree, and I think a big part of that is, we've been stronger in some weapons at one time and stronger than others, and it's really that longevity of keeping all of your programs high level.
I mean, that's part of it. I think that's improvement. And the other part of it is also, I think, inspiration, because I must say that what Mariel Zagunas did in 2004 and also Seda Jacobson getting the first medals in the Olympics in a long time, allowed a lot of our young fencers, including my son Alexander, who went to Athens to watch. He was only 10 years old, to be inspired to say, hey, that's something that I want to do, I can do when I get there. And I think that same inspiration is what we hope our men's foil team helps the other weapons as well. I think it has made a difference as well with our women's foil team. We're kind of fairly close. So it's like if these guys can do it, kind of push them to kind of do it as well, because they feel like they have the same type of opportunities.
Now that we've come fast forward, and you are definitely recognized as one of the best coaches in the world, I'd like to just sort of get some ideas on what's your coaching philosophy, And what do you think it really takes to become a great coach?
Obviously, you've got to have some sort of technical skills. I think it's important to have a fencing maestro kind of program that you've gone through. I was fortunate, even though the program that I went to was sort of an antique kind of program way back in the early 80s, it gave me a structure, an understanding of structure and how lessons and lesson plans build. Certainly being exposed to high level and keeping your mind open to seeing new ideas as, the rules change to adapt to things. Those are things that are very important. The next thing which is very important in the U.S. is that how can you be successful in the U.S.? Because being successful in the U.S. as a coach is different than being successful in Russia, or different than being successful in France or China or a variety of other countries, Italy for that matter. It's like, how can it work for us? I set up a whole system based upon what I considered kind of goals and the end line. So that's important. And ultimately, and I think most importantly, is that you have to have the passion to succeed. You want to see the athletes succeed at the higher level. And you can't get bogged down by small-time sort of politics or whatever and looking at beating who your neighbor is sort of thing. You got to look at the big picture and stay focused on that plan. And that will allow you to grow up and above. People think about making national teams and different things, and they say, I want to make sure I beat that person and this person. And I'm like, no, that has nothing to do with it. You got to beat the Italians. You got to beat the Russians. Because when you go to the World Championships, those are the people you have to beat, not your own countrymates. Right. So it's one thing to say, okay, I made it and I went there. But it's like, my look at it is like, what did you do when you went there? What did you accomplish when you went there? And how can you be prepared for those situations? And then the other thing is that when you always look at the highest level, you will also raise yourself up higher. Because if you just look at just making the U.S. team, then that's like there's a certain limit of where that's all about. If you look at being at the best in the world, well, that's a different level that you're looking at. Now, some of that sometimes is fairly close, like in our men's polo team. But yeah, the concept has to be that. And I think that makes a big difference. And I do think that it does take also organizational structure, because our coaches, for example, tend to be independent operators. They're running clubs or belong to a club. And so you need to have a business perspective that allows you to structure things to be able to make all the commitments that you need to do to become successful. Because if you just go away every weekend and leave your students back home alone, then that's not going to be any good, because they're going to be left out and there's going to be sort of a little rebellion about things, and they're just basically not going to improve. So you have to be able to set things up so even though when you're away, that you have somebody taking care of everything on the home front.
That sort of goes to the fact that our whole system is club-based, and we haven't gotten to the financial position where we can hire those national coaches that it's a full-time job for them and they don't have to worry about providing a living through the other means, and also having the responsibilities of the athletes that, are their personal students.
And in some ways, it's actually a good thing to be in touch with the whole food chain in some ways. In other words, from Y10 to 12, 14 cadet junior. So you have an understanding of where the fencers are kind of coming from and where they're going. And so even though you may not necessarily teach them directly, but you can have influence over other coaches who do those things.
Yeah, and you're in touch with the pipeline, basically. And you're also creating the pipeline, which gives you the level of connection. I just want to get your thoughts on who you feel are some of the best coaches that we've ever seen. Who do you consider some of the best coaches now, and who do you see out there in the future?
We have actually a really great collection of coaches in Sabre right now. In the U.S., and I think we have also an excellent collection of épée coaches. I think that back in the day, I was very fortunate, for example, for myself. My first fencing master was a Hungarian fencing master.
Did you have Donoshi as your first?
Donoshi was my first fencing master. Yeah. And so, that gave me a very good fundamental footwork, because Hungarian. So when I say, people ask me, what about my style? And I say it's based on Hungarian saber footwork, Italian structure because of the school of Italian that I learned about being a maestro, with French because actually a lot of my coaches were French-based. So I said Italian structure with French point control, German work ethic, and Greek exuberance. You got to enjoy what you're doing. So you work hard, you enjoy what you're doing, you have all the good stuff. Currently, you look at many of the top coaches in the world who are national coaches. Used to be Cerioni with Italy and Russia. Now he's on sort of a hiatus of sorts. And I think he's one of the, really good coaches, understands strip tactics really well and understands talent quite well. So he was able to really help, I think, the Russians quite a lot. And before that, when he was in Italy, helped Italy a lot. I think Frank Boydin, he used to be with a French team. Now he's gone to Japan. He's an excellent coach. Oleg in Japan, he's done great things with the Japanese team. He's Ukrainian originally. Those are some that come to mind. I mean, there's a whole slew of coaches that I think of. You have quite a few coaches at that level, on the international level, and then we have a lot of coaches ourselves, Simon Gershon or Sergei Golubitsky, or, of course, Bucky Leach with women's foil, but he also works with us in men's foil as well. I do think that there's a lot of very good talent here. The key is I look at coaches and people talk about coaches, and ultimately it comes down to results. People talk, like they say. Talk is cheap, okay? Yeah. Those who create the results, and it doesn't have to be 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, but you have to look at a period of time over 5, 10, 15 years. How many Olympic medals, how many world championship medals, senior, junior, cadet. Then you start seeing the truth come out. And I think that's where, people can't get too bogged down on what people say because everybody has opinions, but ultimately it's the results that count in our sport.
You mentioned clubs, and you also mentioned your club. One of the things that I think people are always looking, how do we build really strong, established clubs? You have M-Team, you've done a great job. Just give me some thoughts on the clubs and the business of, having an effective and a well-run club.
Well, first of all, I think that coaches have to decide what it is they want to do because there's limited time that you have or your coaches. There's really a finite number. How many students can one coach ultimately really be coaching on a somewhat competitive level, not recreational? Maximum maybe 20. That's stretching the truth a lot. Okay? So the reality is that there's a limit to how many people are there. So you really have to set up a business model for what you want to do. If you want to do recreational and have the bulk of your activity with group classes and stuff, and it's recreation, the kids come in, they have fun, or adults come in, or whatever it is, that's one thing, and that's great. Once you get to, say, you want to be a competitive club, like I say, you want to develop like high-level champions, you will have to set up a business plan. You have to set up a plan of action on how will I start somebody from ground zero when they start at, say, 7, 8 years old or whatever it is, until they, leave me when they go to college, or if I happen to live in an area where they will potentially stay around. The reality is that that's really where the core of the influence that you will have on somebody, because it does take a good 8 to 10 years. I mean, my first Olympian, Garrick, started in 1999, and then 2008 made the Olympic team. He was the youngest U.S. Olympic fencer ever at 18 years old, and that was part of the business plan. Like right here on the side here, I have this 10-year plan, and I go step by step from Y10 to 12 to 14s, cadets, cadet world team, medalist, cadet champion, junior team, junior champion, senior team, senior medals, and the bottom line, Olympic champions, plural. So,
Plural.
Exactly. So the reality is that's sort of what I set up as a driving force for what I want to do. And in my case, because I had these different styles and I wanted to kind of create something that was going to work, I had to look at what was going to be successful here in the U.S., not what's going to be successful in France or in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have like, okay, my end line is going to be this. And then there's the reality that at 18, they're going to go away. So at 18, my goal was make the Olympic team. We'll be right there, right on the cusp of making the Olympic team. And that's where the benchmarks were set. And then after that, you work through the college system somehow and stay in touch and do whatever you can. And then you can ultimately get the final goal. And we've been consistent. The last 10 years, we've gotten medals at the Cadet and Junior World Championships, each of the last 10 years, because we've been able to be consistent, to have people on the national team, on the cadet, on the juniors. So if that's your goal, how are you going to make that consistency? Because you see coaches who work with like a group or one or a group of fencers, and they develop them and they kind of like boom, 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 do something, and they do some great things, and then that person leaves or something happens or even goes on, and then afterwards they've got nothing left behind them. They got to start all over. So the key is having a continuum of things to follow through. Well, that takes planning. That takes planning for yourself. That takes planning for your coaches, how you're going to work the system, how you're going to be in touch with all pieces. So this is why it's important that as a coach, you can't just go there and coach. There's very few clubs or places where you can say, I just come in and coach. You actually have to run an organized structure. The interesting thing is that as you build your core and get stronger, and has, like, for example, with the M team, as we've gotten stronger, we have now got a lot more other coaches who are motivated, inspired. So, like, when I got started in the earlier phases, there was a period of time where we would sort of fairly consistently have, like, 4 of the top 8 at the national, like, Y12, Y10, Y12 competitions. One time we had 5 of the 8 in the competition on the podium. Not that necessarily Y12 makes a difference, but it was just a stepping stone. Now I think we have helped inspire a lot of other coaches to push their game up, and that sort of pushing each other up is what's going to make us better and does make us better. So when I look at people and people say to me, "Oh, don't you worry?" I say, "I don't worry about anybody. I just worry what we do. We go forward." And then the fact that other people there are only going to push us to improve.
I want to commend you on how well you've worked with in your role as national coach with all the other coaches and the cadre, and really gotten that group to be really cohesive, and they work together well. So that's and that's like the first time we've seen that level of leadership in the weapons programs, and I'm real happy you're doing it. Congratulations, and looking to see it, keep developing along around the fencing world in the U.S. We're going to go back in time a little bit. So when you were a competitive fencer, there were a few people on the team with you. One of them we know very well. You got a chance to see him in Virginia Beach, Mr. Peter Westbrook. You guys used to room together. What was it like back in the day being on teams with Peter, and just what was it like being on the U.S. team? Because we were competitive, but a lot of the team were, I would say, fencing tourists. They knew that their goal was to make the team. Of course, Peter and you guys were going after medals, but so give me an idea what it was like during that period, both from a personal standpoint.
First of all, in that especially the early days of when I was first starting up in the late 70s, when I was on the senior national team, that time period, it was quite challenging because, you had to fight your way to kind of go forward. But the other members of the team were in their late 20s or 30s. So I'm like 20 or 21 years old. Peter was like, he's about 4 years older than me. And also the saber fencers maybe even older than the foil fencers.
Right.
So he was 24, I'm 20, so we're actually closer in age, more reality in terms of what goes on. And then we shared interests with our teammates who were like in their 30s. Not that they were bad people. It's just like, we were different. We were the young blood, you know what I mean? And we came in with a new attitude. We were the ones that traveled internationally. We were the ones that were looking to make a difference. The other ones were trying to, in their own kind of way, that kind of happened. You have to realize back then there were people who would start fencing in college and then 10, 12 years later make the Olympic team when they were like 30 or 32. Yeah. So, it's a very different kind of animal. So Pete and I hung out a lot together. We would, go out and looking for young ladies or whatever it happened to be. And, we came with a little bit more of a swag of kind of going after things and being successful. And, we developed a good rapport. I hung out and I enjoyed watching Sabre. He enjoyed watching, a lot of the foil events and stuff. So we actually had a chance to sort of be together. And, World Championships back then, you used to stay for a longer period of time and you would have a chance to see all the other events as well. So it was kind of a nice opportunity for both of us to kind of be able to see how everybody else was doing and inspire everybody else. And at the Pan Am Games, there I was cheering him on against Manuel Ortiz, cheering him on, El Campeón, and, driving the other guy crazy and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun back in those days. And it's fun now, too. But like I said, I think that's where Pete and I had a good relationship. And that's why we would become roommates at the Pan Am's, Olympic Games, things like that.
So you got a couple of children who do pretty well in this sport. I mean, isn't that amazing? First of all, congratulations on Alexander. First male to win the World Cup, 2-year U.S. male to win the World Cup, and then winning it twice in a row. Pretty amazing. And then, Sabrina at Notre Dame, former youth Olympic champion and part of our national team. What's it like being coach, father, chauffeur, all of those things as they're growing up and as they become Olympians and world-class athletes?
Well, first of all, the one thing, I never pushed my kids into fencing. Number one, Alexander was like 3 years old. Sabrina wasn't even born when I was thinking about getting it started. And she was just basically born when I first kind of got the first group started. And I think that makes a big difference because I think a lot of times coaches sort of like tell their kids they should be doing it. And I just didn't really do that. I was sort of the opposite. They had to push me into doing it. Sort of the same way that I do about our kids in terms of our things competing at tournaments. I don't push our kids to compete in tournaments. They have to prove to us that they want to compete. So number one, I think that was it. So the second thing is, we do have a lot of obviously fencing memorabilia from Olympic rings or medals from different Pan Ams and all that kind of stuff that as the kids were growing up that was sort of surrounding, in the home. So even though I tend not to speak about fencing too much at the home, it sort of surrounds you. And then the other thing, of course, we did participate. We did go to, Olympic Games to watch in Athens in 2004. The kids Alexander started fencing at that point. So and Sabrina at that point as well, actually. But, I sort of like, because knowing that I'm a coach, I didn't want that to be what they wanted to do. They wanted to do it because they wanted to do it. And I think it made a big difference because then we had our program. And fortunately, the first generation of my fencers was sort of like Garrick's generation. He was the first generation. So Alexander was sort of the second generation. So that was actually good because then Garrick came through, had some amazing things. Then that only inspired Alexander on a local basis and also had him to work with to kind of raise his game up as he kind of went forward and go after that. And then subsequently with Sabrina as well. And I think that makes a big difference in teaching your own kids. The other thing is that I also always look at the kids. I look at all my fencers as the same. So when I make coaching decisions based upon who I'm coaching at any specific time or whatever it is, I never gave our kids any different things than I did with anybody else. They also all got to know that there was not a sense of entitlement. There was that they earn whatever it is they do on their own. They did not get it from me because I helped them more, I gave them more lessons or did whatever else. Also, our structure is such that, you fence 3 or 4 times a week, period, even at the top level, and then take 2 lessons a week. That sort of all through high school, Garrick making Olympic team, Alexander making Olympic team, Sabrina, everybody, whoever you want to say through our whole system, David Willett, et cetera, et cetera. As a parent and as a coach, that's always a fine line when you're a coach, when you're a parent. And I told them, when I'm here, I'm a coach. After it's over, I'm a parent. So I'm there to help pick up the pieces. Obviously, being very proud papa of both my children being junior world champions and, youth Olympics and all the stuff. And I think that, Alexander, of course, gets all the merits because he is the first person to win 2 back-to-back World Cup titles. Actually, Race was the first one to win 1 time, and then subsequently Alexander won 2 years in a row. And he's done a tremendous job, and I'm very proud of him. I'm also equally proud of Sabrina, what she's accomplishing, what she's doing, whether it was a youth Olympic champion and so on and so forth. And, every kid will also take their own pace, how they're going to go. Alexander, we were fortunate he stayed at Stanford. That's where he wanted to go. Sabrina wanted to go to Notre Dame, I think partly because she didn't want to follow in her brother's footsteps. And as great as she is, she was always the younger one at the same school from pre-K to, middle
wanted to get out of her brother's shadow.
And so at college, she wanted to do her own thing. And I think that had a lot to do with. And I think it was the right choice for her. I think Notre Dame is an outstanding place. And the fact that Bucky moved there as well is even greater. So, it's all a big bonus. Would we have liked her to be here close by? Yes. But I think this was the right choice for her. I always left it up to her. I said, both kids, doesn't matter. Fencing or, whatever things happen, tuition, et cetera, don't worry about that. Just go to where you want to be, what's going to be right for you.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate that you have taken the time to be here with me. It means a lot to me. We'll just keep working on and getting ready to take a bunch of medals in Japan in 2020 in Tokyo. So
gold medals, that's the goal.
Gold medals. Is there another color? Sometimes we sure.
We gotta up the game, You always, I said, you gotta go up or you're gonna go down. So we gotta keep going up.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Swordsport Podcast. The Swordsport Podcast is a production of Swordsport.tv and is produced and engineered by myself, Don Anthony, and Rick Lotzenheiser. We would like to give a special thank you to the King Arts Complex and their CEO, Demetrius Neely, for providing us a great space to work from in Columbus, Ohio. To subscribe to the Swordsport Podcast, check us out on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube.